Today I'll be dropping tons of information, so if you live and breathe Dark and Darker, I hope you enjoy. Brothers and sisters, Early Access Patch 3 actually started off pretty well. The Squire was a great addition, and normals felt fantastic. However, with multiple balance changes and the addition of multiclassing, well, in the past week, 80% of the Reddit posts are quite negative, and in the private Troubadour chat, in the Dark and Darker Discord, it's getting pretty negative in there. I'll spare you the details. So, how did we get here, and how do we improve the game and move forward? Before we get deep into the data and solutions, let me give you a quick gamer overview of myself so you can decide whether I'm a reliable source of information. I started playing Dark and Darker during Playtest 3 in 2022. 8 months ago, I started a YouTube for helping players and entertainment, and it's since grown thanks to you all. I play all characters, and most wipes I have max characters with max levels. I've played Dark and Darker at the highest levels, and I can solo every boss in the game with Cleric, not an easy mode class like Warlock or Bard. I've put thousands of hours into hundreds of games, including games that are adjacent to Dark and Darker, like Chivalry and Mordhau for their skill-based melee combat, and even I'd mention Rust for its very hardcore nature and wipe cycles. But enough about me, let's get to the data. If I could only give one piece of advice to Ironmace, it would be to focus on the core gameplay loop. Every time you make a decision, think, does this improve or hurt the core gameplay loop? This is what keeps people addicted in playing your game, increases sales, increases player retention, everything. If we look at the recent success of Helldivers, which is still number 4 on Steam right now, did it become popular because of its story or the writing? No, it's just really fun to play. So, what's the core gameplay loop in Dark and Darker? To me, this starts with the pre-dungeon shop phase, where you're dealing with merchants, you're buying gear, buying consumables, and you're preparing to go into the dungeon. Next would be the dungeon phase, where you're looting, opening chests, fighting PvE, PvP, boss maybe, questing, and finally escaping. Third would be the post-dungeon shop phase, where you're selling your trinkets, equipment, valuables, and upgrading whatever you can, and with future content like hideouts maybe or guilds. However, we can greatly simplify this into 2 phases, the home phase and the dungeon phase. That's it. The dungeon phase is the most important, and it's the main part of the game. This is where most players will spend most of their time. The home phase exists to supplement and help the dungeon phase. We should have plenty of things here for players to spend their time and hard-earned gold on. However, we shouldn't force players to spend a lot of time here. Currently, and in the past, you have to spend quite a bit of time gearing up in order to be viable at high levels. This detracts from the core gameplay loop. Alright, let's continue on. So what else can we do to improve the core gameplay loop? Well, I would suggest adding hideouts, guilds, more gold sinks, and better inventory management, like backpacks, utility bags, and quivers. Actually, Ironmace has talked about doing every one of those things, but it seems like they keep getting distracted with other things. If Ironmace still wants to stick to their original 3 map tier vision, where you go into a map, you extract, go down, and then down again, and that's one raid, then we're going to need things like backpacks for more inventory, and maybe a POI or some mechanic where we can send loot up, because you get filled after 1 level. Utility bags would combat consumable spam as well as throwable spam, and quivers would be great quality of life. Next, I would continue adding more mobs, bosses, maps, floors to dungeons, dungeon POIs, and in-raid events. An example of a dungeon POI could be like an elevator man who has an elevator, and if you go to him and pay him a certain amount of trinkets worth in gold, he will send a portion of your inventory up safely out of the raid. The core gameplay loop should be fun and engaging, and we shouldn't rely on artificial engagement tactics like high grinding requirements, dailies, or loot boxes. Honestly, we've started to see high grinding requirements with multiclassing, and the rewards that you get from it on the side kind of feel a little bit like loot boxes, but, I sure hope they don't go that route, especially since they claimed that that was exactly what they were trying to escape from with Nexon. Now, they've talked about adding Arena to the game, but we need to really think. Will Arena add or distract from the core gameplay loop? If it adds to it, then add it. But if it's going to distract from it, if it's a separate thing and it's going to pull players away and it doesn't fit in the gameplay loop well, then maybe we shouldn't do it. Although Tarkov is a successful game, we don't need to copy everything from them. Not everything there is good or will fit in this game. After creating a solid and fun gameplay loop, only then will Ironmace have earned the right to start monetizing the player base without us getting upset. If you look at Rust, for example, Facepunch, the devs, have created a game in which they've spent years and years and years adding content to it. They still add content every single month. And although they're far from perfect, Every week they release new skins, and some of them are not cheap. And this happens every single week. I can't even imagine how much money they're making. Not only there, but off the Steam Marketplace, off resales, and DLCs, and so on. But the point here is tons of engaging content, then you earn the right to monetize even more. Alright, I really want to get to gear because that issue is causing so many other issues for the game. But first, we have to talk about the most recent issue, which is causing other issues, and that's multiclassing. Multiclassing is completely unbalanced. The class identity is ruined. You cannot look at a wizard and think, oh, he's going to do wizard stuff. You have no idea what he's going to do. Counterplay is ruined because of that. It feels arcadey, like the arcade genre. It does not feel like a hardcore or gritty game. To make an FPS analogy, imagine this game is Arma, and this new update makes it feel like Call of Duty. They're both good games in their own right, but we're not here to play Call of Duty. It requires way too much grinding, artificial grinding on multiple characters. Maybe you don't even want to play some of these characters, which again hurts the core gameplay loop. And finally, further increases the power gap between low and high time investment players. Some people have tons of tokens for ridiculous OP builds, and they can continue repeating to roll until they get the perfect build, while players with less time have worse builds or sometimes don't even multiclass. This is a lot of wasted development time, and if we spend all this time doing other things, I think we could definitely accomplish more and make the player base happier. Really quick, I suggest we stop repeating old mistakes. So we've tried the +2 all, +3 all experiment multiple times actually, and we've known it's a bad idea in the past, and yet we tried it again this patch. We tried the +3/+4 damage stacking meta, and we also know that's a bad idea, and yet we did it again this patch. So why does Ironmace keep making the same mistakes and making the player base suffer through it? I don't know. The second part of this is repeated missed deadlines. They've been getting worse about this recently compared to before, and although there are many examples, we'll only touch on a few. Druid was supposed to be released in November, and then it got pushed back to December, and they said Ice Maps and Druid would come in December. Then they said January, but they missed that deadline. Then they finally released Ice Caves and said Druid was coming February, and then March. And now they've said end of April, but there's only a couple days left, and there's been no communication. Arena was supposed to already be out, but that hasn't happened either. And it's not even making deadlines for future events. One time on a podcast, they said they're going to release the patch tomorrow. That's 24 hours or less, right? And then they missed that deadline. As a leader, whoever is in charge of making the deadlines, you need to take a step back and think, why am I not able to make a realistic deadline even 24 hours away? If you think about it, every time Ironmace repeats a painful mistake, the player base loses a little bit of trust. And of course, again, this is wasted development time. We've tried these experiments, they failed, we learned from them, and yet we redo them. Next, increase time to kill for better gameplay. So, right now, many builds, even without multiclassing, can kill in under a second in 1 or 2 hits. Higher time to kill will increase the fight duration, which allows for more counterplay, tactic changes, and skill display. If you die in 1 second, it sometimes feels kind of cheap, like you didn't have time to react or any way to counter that reliably or realistically. If someone dies to a weapon combo before you even finish it, what's the point of having weapon combos? We need more time to display the cool, intricate parts of this game and allow people to counterplay each other. So why is time to kill so short? Well, it's because gear is so strong, and gear being strong causes the other issues, like random modifiers are too strong. They start making GBMM, gear-based matchmaking, again because the disparity is too strong. Why else would they need it? Highly geared players are destroying low geared players. The range of power between them is too great. And since damage is still high across the board, range meta is very strong. It's low risk, high reward. Now, allow me to show you why gear disparity is so strong and why it's causing so many other issues in the game. And what do I suggest to fix it? So, let's take a look at riveted gloves. Here are all the riveted gloves in the game currently. And here I want you to take a look at the lowest tier versus the highest tier. The armor rating difference is 155% difference. So someone with unique gloves is going to have 155% higher armor than someone with the worst quality gloves. The strength rating difference is 600%, and that's going from the second lowest quality, because the lowest quality doesn't actually have a number there, and we couldn't even make a percent. But still, 600%, that's crazy. Even if we're going to the middle of the road, even above it at blue tier, right, better than half, the armor rating difference from there to the highest tier is still 44%, and the strength difference is 75%. If you're a high gear player in blues, even facing, someone in legendaries and uniques, for them to be anywhere from 40 to 70 to 80% stronger than you, it's insane. It doesn't matter if you have more skill, you're going to get stat checked. This is even more so when you throw on range damage, which is super low risk in many situations, and so on. So, this system is hard to balance because the disparity is so great, and this is what causes many imbalances, and again, the GBMM and so on. So, here's an example that I put together. Keep in mind, this is from a hobbyist perspective. This is not my job. It would be way better if it was my job and way more thorough. But this is just an example to get some thinking going on the subject. So, here is how I've redesigned the gear here. You'll notice we've taken off the lowest tier, and the highest tier is going to be even more rare than named uniques. Uniques will no longer be unnamed. It'll only be something with a special minor ability, and again, super rare, so that's really not the top. So we're going to compare the lowest to the highest now. Now, the armor rating difference is going from 10 to 15 is 50%. The strength difference is now only 133%. It's still a lot in my opinion, but it's nowhere near as high as it used to be before. Going from the middle of the road, a little higher than that at blue, again, the armor rating difference from the highest tier is now only 15%, and the strength difference is only 40. This means you are much more viable against higher level players at this level. However, even to me, the 40% is high. So this is just a rough idea. Again, we can make this much better and tighter to where these strength values are not so high. But at least this is way more in line compared to what we have right now. Even if we compare to the ultra rare highest tier of named unique, the difference is still not completely unmanageable. Now, I don't know, I have some mixed feelings about random modifiers. They really make the game unbalanced, and they make gear unbalanced. You can find a piece of blue gear that's better than legendary gear, even unique gear. And I don't think that should be possible. I think that kind of breaks the gameplay loop. I'm suddenly not happy to get a unique if it's got bad stats. And I have to check through every blue and green gear to make sure I'm not missing good stats, because it might be more valuable than its current tier, right? But look, if just really roughly, if we have to keep random modifiers in the game, let's nerf them a ton, okay? I don't know, maybe 40 to 70%, and then we can throw on base gear again if we need to. And then the only gear with modifiers starts at blue. Blue has 1, purple has 2, and legendary has 3. However, I don't like going from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. These are still big percentage bonuses, right? But we have to consider the modifiers have to be much, much weaker. If we split the game up even further here from normals to high roller, honestly, I probably wouldn't mind it. Of course, you can still loot high roller stuff in normals, right? But you can go into normals now with green gear and not be incredibly overpowered compared to base gear. That part would be nice. I think right now green gear really struggles to have a place, except for in times of gear-based matchmaking, because then people just pull out gear calculators. But in normal times, where there's no GBMM, green gear really doesn't have a place, except in budget gear. Alright, the next point coincides with our focus on the core gameplay loop, and that is the noob and solo experience has to be good. This is because everyone is a noob or a solo, or both, at some point. The game can be hardcore, but the new and solo players must have a good enough experience, or else they won't stay and convert into veterans and paying fans. We should add a shared stash. This is a huge benefit to solo players. Not being able to trade gear to your other characters just because your friends are not online kind of sucks. Next, we should add shared quests progression, so we're not forced to play on one character. We can continue to experiment with many different characters without being punished. We still get our quest rewards. We've talked about hideout and guilds and gold sinks, but again, these things would add to the noob and solo experience. I enjoy playing duos and trios a lot, but we can't just cater to the teams. Now, the next two are related to the gear disparity and gear being too strong. We've touched on these before. There should be a nerf to random modifiers and a buff to built-in modifiers, right? Again, the blue rare with good rolls should not be better than an orange legendary with bad rolls. That just doesn't make sense. We should slightly buff the inbuilt modifiers so that each tier is reliably distinct from each other. But again, we shouldn't have too many tiers of gear because then it gets out of control quickly. Next, we should remove GBMM. There's no need for gear-based matchmaking if we fix the gear disparity in general. But, talking about GBMM, it messes up the core gameplay loop. It makes a lot of people use calculators and gear score manipulation. You're spending way more time gearing up, and if you don't, well, you're at a disadvantage because you might be in a higher bracket. The strength of low gear with good rolls is still pretty high, right, with damage stacking. If I have green gear with +2 damage, that's good gear. It's not bad. So GBMM doesn't really even work, let's just be honest, unless they tie it to the random modifiers or something. And it's creating low pop and empty lobbies for a lot of people. This is not fun. Again, it's affecting our core gameplay loop. And even if we keep it, we have to show the gear score, but I don't think we should keep it. It's horrible. It increases the power gap between low and high time investment players. And again, it's wasted development time trying to make it work. Next, the ranged meta is still too strong. It's been this way for over a year, as we all know. But look, ranged damage is incredibly versatile, strong, and low risk compared to most melee in many situations. Melee have to close distance and put themselves at risk, while ranged can just jiggle peek most of the time and shoot off a shot around a doorway, putting themselves at very little risk, only to other ranged damage. Ranged damage can poke, skirmish, initiate, carry fights, deny areas, deny doorways, stop pushes. You can use it to kite, to chase, to stop kiting and chasing. It has great range across even more than 2 modules. Like, can we just try an experiment where all forms of range damage, skills, and spells are nerfed, let's say 25 to 35%? Honestly, I believe range damage will still be very useful, strong, relevant, and viable. It's just too strong in many situations. Even with less damage, it'll have good use. So yeah, could we please try this on the test server since we have one now? I don't know. Just my suggestion. Alright, moving on to marketplace speculation or reselling. I think we should remove it. This is going to be very controversial, especially among the people that are doing the reselling, but let's just try to be honest when we look at this. Reselling is more profitable than HR bossing, and this undermines the core gameplay loop. This should not be possible. Look, the more money you have, the more money you can make. If you have enough money to buy an artifact, you can take it and resell it and make a chest off it. Like, you can make so much money reselling in this game. Reselling causes price inflation, hoarding, speculation, and other negative behaviors, right? Some people just fill up their stash tabs on other characters, speculating on one type of item. This drives up the price. We should remove the ability to resell on the marketplace. If you take something out of a raid, you can sell it. If you buy it on the marketplace, you cannot resell it until you bring it back into the raid. That way people cannot resell. Currently, if 80% of good artifacts, like let's say Viola or Kumas, are sold on discords instead of in-game, then that consolidates economic and game power into the discords. We do not want discord people influence our game and the game's economy. But they already do. I mean, look at this guy Ditch or whoever you want to. We don't want these people influencing our game. There should be artifacts sold in-game, and that's it. We could talk about a lot of shady things in the discords, but let's move on. So, if Ironmace can go in and really beef up and strengthen the core gameplay loop and fix a lot of these other issues that we're dealing with, and they're ready for new players, here's my recommendation. Use simple, effective marketing. You don't need to go crazy with it. First, make sure the core gameplay loop is fleshed out, engaging, and enjoyable. Okay? Then, when you're ready, a large part of the gaming community is already aware of Dark and Darker. It achieved good publicity last year with the whole Nexon lawsuit issues, and even some rewards from high-profile gamers like the OTK organization. So, the marketplace is already primed. All Ironmace needs to do is a gentle marketing push for the gamers and the big streamers to start playing again and getting it in front of other people's eyes and start sharing it with word of mouth, right? If the core gameplay loop is good, the game will grow by word of mouth and people playing it. Something like a simple Twitch drop, like just a purple torch, right? And a new trailer showcasing the gameplay loop with all the new content to bring the people back, right? That's all Ironmace needs to reignite the interest of the gaming community, in my opinion. This will require low labor, right? Low investment from Ironmace, but it has great return potential. If you're still here after 20 minutes, you are a Giga Chad. Thank you. You must really care about Dark and Darker. I had some more quick ideas, but we'll skip them for now. The main takeaways for this video are as follows. First, and most importantly, Ironmace should focus on the core gameplay loop. Every development decision must first consider the impact on the core gameplay loop. This is what makes games successful. Second, they should tighten the gear disparity. This is what's causing so many other issues in the game. High gear players should not be overwhelmingly powerful against low gear players, especially if they're outskilled. And third, don't repeat mistakes and failed experiments over and over again. For example, the +3 all meta, or the +4 damage stacking meta, or else the player's trust and patience will erode over time. I know sometimes the reasoning is that Ironmace is getting data, but we need to think, how much are we degrading the player base's experience and enjoyment? I've taken multiple breaks from this game during bad patches, and I have some friends who have quit that I don't know if I'll see them again. However, I have high hopes for Ironmace creating a game which brings new and old players to it and keeps them engaged and having a great experience. Whether you agree or disagree with some or all of my points, please make some comments below. I would love to hear what you say, for or against my arguments. I would love to be proven wrong, or to hear different sides of the argument so that I can refine my ideas and thoughts. If you can, be very verbose, and we can have a high-quality discussion in the comments. No matter what you think, thank you for caring about this game, and I will see you in the dungeons. NotLikeThis, out.